It's election day here in Australia, and like Harold Holt in the ocean, you might be feeling a little bit lost, but that's all right because I'm here to break it down for you. Welcome to Spears vs. the Australian election. In a world where America went one way and Canada went the other, it's Australia's turn to choose which liar they like the least. For the last 50 years, Australians haven't been stoked about either option, and that's what makes our country so great. Because here in Australia, no matter which dickhead wins the election, they're still a dickhead. In Australia, voting is mandatory, so unlike the Yanks, we don't see it as a privilege, we see it as a chore. But at least we fucking do our chores. In this video, I'm going to break down the types of voters in our country, the big issues that we care about, the big important parties, and the bigger, less important, but still very important, independent parties too. I'm Lewis Spears, I'm touring Australia, England, Scotland, and Ireland. Like, subscribe, and see me live in 25. Now, let's look at the generation of voters our politicians have to impress. As always, first and most importantly, we have the boomers. Let's be real, there's never been a more selfish generation completely devoid of empathy and kindness. The boomers have responded to the last 15 years of younger people screaming out for help with the smug suggestion of not buying avocado toast and using that money to buy a home, preferably from them, for the average price of more than $1 million or 14 times the median wage. That's what a house costs in this hellhole of a country. If you need to save money for a house, simply stop buying things you don't need, like food, said the suntan senior with 7 properties he owns but does not live in. Boomers hoarding homes and using their real estate wealth to pressure governments into ensuring that housing remains a forever lucrative investment option is the reason why young people can't afford to rent anything without mold that turns them non-binary. Every now and then you will encounter a boomer that does actually care about the next generation, but only because they want to make sure that next generation is the same color as them. But to be fair to the boomer generation, not all of them are horrible old selfish cretins who think they're geniuses because they bought 10 homes for $2. Some of them are dead. Next generation, Gen X. What have we got here? Gen X is one of the generations. Next generation, Millennials. Millennials, mostly preoccupied with pretending they're still the young and cool generation. Most of them have given up on buying a home and are instead saving up for an official autism diagnosis. Because if there's one thing that helps you feel better about having roommates at 35, it's a piece of paper that says, I paid a doctor $2,000 to call me retarded. I wonder why I have no savings. Millennial men were once excited to change the world, but unfortunately, the world changed them. The funny guy you went to school with is now an insufferable real estate agent, going from class clown to class traitor. This smug fuck sold homes to real estate investors instead of young families, and they put him on a billboard for it. He should be put on a wanted poster. Just as bad as the annoying millennial man, millennial women love to whinge about old people hoarding homes, but half the millennial women who complain about this went into nursing. Ladies, you are keeping our boomer oppressors alive much longer than anyone expected or wanted them to be alive. Not even the boomers themselves are having fun anymore. Please let them die. Gen X is waiting on their inheritance still. If we really wanted housing to become affordable again, Jenny in geriatric care needs to start making some mistakes. Now, unlike Gen Z, unfortunately, most millennials were dumb enough to follow the boomers' advice to keep their heads down and work hard. But these formerly young workers have had their heads down for so long that Gen Z is making fun of their bald spots while they drown. The few lucky millennials who did manage to buy a home did it one of two ways, with a secret loan from mum and dad, kept a secret so they can pretend to be smarter than renters, or they were forced to purchase a home so far away from anyone they'd ever met that if you didn't see their dozens of braggadocious Facebook posts in front of a fucking sold sticker, you would think they died. No, unfortunately, they suffered a fate even worse than death. They moved to Geelong. Now, these young homeowners, despite moving to a more affordable neighborhood, have been hit so hard by variable interest rates that they're all converting to Islam. Completely unable to pay for anything other than some of their mortgage, these soon-to-be former homeowners are by far the most frustrated generation of voters, because we grew up in a world where buying a nice home with the median wage and living comfortably was actually possible. But by the time we entered the workforce, that dream disappeared faster than the Olympic hopes of a white sprinter racing next to Gout Gout. This far-off dream of home ownership has been swiftly replaced with a slightly less impossible fantasy of renting a home from a boomer landlord that won't illegally deny your rental application because you adopted a dog during COVID, so you had at least one reason not to kill yourself. And you did a very good job, didn't you, Bobby? But you still needed reinforcements, and even that wasn't enough. I know. She was an impulse adoption. I was very sad. Despite rapidly becoming the biggest and most important voting demographic, especially when combined with Gen Z, who millennials agree with on almost everything except for skinny jeans and Katy Perry, millennials' concerns around housing affordability are ignored by both major parties because Labor and Liberal politicians own, on average, 2.5 homes each. This means that just about every single politician making decisions about the housing market directly profits from the ever-increasing cost of both renting and owning. Fixing this would, of course, be economically irresponsible for them. And so, if you're wondering why Star Wars movies and video games keep making hundreds of millions of dollars despite being garbage, it's because there is a lot of money to be made from millennials who wish they could go back to a time where they had hope for the future. Gen Z, the kids who missed out on half their teenage years because the plandemic was going to end in 2 months for 4 years. With the amount of school these baggy-jeaned, broccoli-cut, sheltered scrollers missed out on, is it any wonder they're assembling vigilante groups to terrorize cinemas? Unlike millennials, Gen Z grew up plugged into the internet from the moment they could read, and half of them before they could read. This has resulted in that half still not being able to read. Seriously, have you seen the literacy rates of these kids? It's atrocious. And it's not even their fault. I mean, when I was 10, if you weren't reading Harry Potter, bigoted bullies would call you gay. Now, if you're caught with a J.K. Rowling book in school, the gay bullies call you bigoted. Gen Z grew up watching what happened to millennials when we worked hard and saw that the only reward was a soul-crushing corporate job where your manager was the boss's son. Completely devoid of any hope of ever owning a home, the dream for Gen Z is a job with no dress code and a rental with no mold. These kids look at both parties and understand that any politician who can ignore the desperate pleas of Palestinian children getting bombed to death in refugee camps can easily ignore a gender-fluid 23-year-old who would like to afford groceries and rent at the same time. What older generations don't understand about the life that Gen Z has to live is that the days of handing in your resume in person and walking into a lifelong career that will eventually lead to you buying a home and being the CEO are over. Gen Z kids are instead forced to beg divorced women in HR for a job with a cover letter, a CV, references that were faked and given to them by friends, and for them to perform a humiliation ritual in the form of a 2-minute video explaining why you're so passionate about spreadsheets just so they can advance you to a 3rd round interview and hire the boss's cousin's son instead. In between underpaid shifts at the business casual depression factory, Gen Z adults spend their spare money on Fortnite skins because tangible items are for the rich. And they spend most of their free time by watching real-time war footage from all the various genocides their tax dollars are directly funding against their will. Is it any wonder why Gen Z is quiet quitting at work when the world has loudly quit on them? Now, let's break down the major parties, shall we? The two big players we have here in Australia are Labor and Liberals. It's a very close election between these two this year. We've got our centre-right party, the Liberals. I know, Americans. Liberals for us, they're the right-wing people. For you, it's the left-wing people. Very confusing, but also, you probably don't give a fuck. Why are you even watching this? Just play along, will you? Most of the Liberal politicians who are making decisions on the housing crisis are landlords. landlords. And then we have Labour. Most of them are also landlords too, so fuck it, who cares? I don't even want a house. We also have a bunch of independent small parties because we have a system called preferential voting, which is the greatest voting system in the world. And yes, it's still fucked. It's just the least shit idea the world's come up with. I'm only going to focus on the bigger two parties because, let's be real, some of the independents are so insane that I can't write jokes that are funnier than what they actually believe. We've got our party for the woke and broke, the Greens, and we have our party for the white and right, One Nation. First up, we've got the Libs. Their leader, a Voldemort-looking ex-cop landlord who bought so many houses for his investment portfolio, at least 26 properties, that now even his own son on the campaign trail for this election said that he couldn't afford to buy his own home. Leader of the Liberal Party, which again for the Seppos is our right-wing party, Peter Dutton, known for going on holiday during a national disaster, something which is apparently becoming a tradition for Liberal leaders. Mr. Dutton, taking a leaf out of Donald Trump's book, has started calling the ABC hate media for asking questions like, will you help your son buy a house because you have 26 of them? And do you think it's bad that one of your candidates lied about being a young renter herself when actually she is a venture capital banker landlord that owns 2 properties in London and Australia? This election is particularly important for Mr. Potato Head because the electorate he represents is the most marginal seat in Queensland. What that means is Peter Dutton could win the national election but lose his local seat. If that happens, even though he won the election, his first act as Prime Minister would be to step down as Prime Minister. Because in Australia, if you don't hold a seat in your local electorate, you can't be the leader of your party, no matter how many homes in your local electorate you own at the expense of the people you claim to represent. The Liberal Party, whose main selling point seems to be, don't vote for that guy, he's woke and gay, which, to be fair, is a pretty compelling argument. They are promising a lot in regards to the economy and cost of living. For example, Peter Dutton is telling us that he can make groceries cheaper, but he can't tell us what groceries cost. He was asked how much are eggs. He said $4. They cost about $8. Wrong. I don't understand how you can get the price of eggs wrong. Brother, you are shaped like one. My man, you look like you hatched from a carton of cage eggs, put on a suit and started buying up as many cages as you could just to sell it back to your fellow caged eggs for a much higher price. Now, despite being a reason why immigration has increased to such a high point, Liberals are blaming the housing crisis on the immigrants that they welcomed into our country. They are also ignoring the fact that Australia builds houses slower than almost every single comparable nation by at least 5 times. And in true Aussie spirit, we're getting slower. The average apartment used to take 19 months, which was already slow. Now it takes 33 months to build. I think that instead of lowering immigration, we should just try a new type of immigrant. Why don't we pick up a few Mexicans that are trying to cross the border into America? Lord knows Trump will be happy to get rid of them. Have you seen how quickly those people build their homes on TikTok? Fuck, put a couple of Hermanos on a roof and watch our housing crisis be solved in 2 weeks. I mean, even if the housing situation doesn't improve, at least we would get some good Mexican food in this country. Mad Mex sucks and Guzman and Gomez is soggy. Now, what do Liberals think about the rising cost of childcare? Well, Peter Dutton not only previously declared a large portfolio of 26 properties, he also owns, of course, a childcare fucking empire. All right, so some lefty snowflakes might start to think this guy is personally incentivized to ensure the cost of housing and childcare keeps steadily rising, but they are non-binary and therefore an idiot. Now, Labour. Labour. Speaking of those lefties, let's cover the next major party, Labour. For most normal people, Labour is about as far left they're prepared to go because they don't want to think about gender identities or vote for someone with pig hair. The leader of the Labour is Friendly Geordies. Anthony Albanese, a man who appears to be slightly charismatic, but only because he's running against landlord Voldemort. Albo grew up in housing commission with a single mother on disability, so it makes sense that his rival is a cop. The Labour Party are currently in power, and while in charge, the cost of living, rent, mortgage rates, bills, and cocaine have all been steadily increasing. But if you vote them in one more time, they promise things will get better. The Labour Party's main selling point is don't vote for that guy, he's bald and scary looking, which, to be fair, is a compelling argument. Labor has been consistently bashed by the mainstream media in Australia. They are constantly being hamstrung by the opposition, and despite allowing mining magnates to get away with avoiding corporate taxes and export taxes, they are clearly not liked by our obese crime lord Australian Jabba the Hutt, Gina Rinehart. Interest rates under Labor have been skyrocketing, but despite conditions for those interest rates to be lowered being met for almost a year now, they've barely moved at all. It almost seemed... Oh, good, she fucking shit in the office. That sucks. Sorry, I gotta pick up shit. We'll continue the Labour roast in a second. Right, where were we? Interest rates under Labor have been skyrocketing, but despite conditions for those interest rates to be lowered being met for almost a year now, they've barely moved at all. Gee, it almost seems like the powers that be, from media to mining to banking, are conspiring together to make sure Labor loses this election. A good leader understands that common people like to support parties that stand up to the elites, but Prime Minister Kevin Rudd was kicked out of the Labor Party for trying to tax mining super profits. So now, Labor leaders understand they can't rock the boat too much. Next up, we have the Greens. If you want to turn a boomer red, tell them you're voting Greens. The Greens Party are the idealistic, young, fun, and cool party. Their leader, Adam Bandt, a man who looks like a Christian youth counsellor who's cool because he swears sometimes, is absolutely crushing it on TikTok by calling for housing affordability, while, like every politician in this fucking country, is a landlord himself. However, like a black guy in a MAGA hat, Adam Bandt says, "Don't worry guys, I'm one of the good ones." The Greens, very admirably, is one of the only parties that does not accept donations from mining, fossil fuels, gambling, alcohol, or tobacco. I guess you could say these guys are the party equivalent of a straight edge guy that promises not to judge you for smoking, but definitely makes a face every time you do light up. This lack of big donation from big business seems like a good idea until you see how some of their candidates actually dress. For the love of God, would a mining magnate please get them a stylist? The Greens stand for more housing, more healthcare, more taxes on mining super profits, and could probably get your parents' votes if they didn't also stand for more genders. And the final party we'll be covering is my favorite, One Nation. One Nation. Standing opposite the Greens is the infamous One Nation Party, run by Pauline Hanson, who's famous for claiming the country is being swamped by Asians, and a big fan of the White Australia policy. Pauline wants to be seen as the representative of the common man, but not many commoners I know get to go on international holidays with the richest bloke in Australia, Gina Rinehart. Interesting that after that holiday, Pauline started talking a lot less about banning cheap immigrant labour and a lot more about expanding coal and gas projects. But hey, maybe I'm just woke and gay. One Nation voters are the type to go to the library to use Twitter and be paranoid about foreigners influencing our country's politics while incessantly posting about American politics from outside of their country. The One Nation voter wants a politician who says the things that we're all thinking, and by that they mean slurs. The One Nation voter is also not a big fan of Asians, except for when they're on a solo Bali trip. Right, with the parties done, let's break down some of the big issues that all voters in Australia care about a lot. These issues will decide this year's election, and due to a growing frustration that none of them are improving fast enough, both major parties are losing major ground to independent, smaller parties. We've got the cost of living, housing affordability, and immigration. Let's start off with your dad's favourite, immigration. One of the biggest issues for all voters is immigration. Some young people, and many old people, are united on their anti-immigration stance. Young people because they believe that immigration coming into the country increases demand on housing supply for both renters and people looking to buy. This makes it more expensive for citizens. Boomers don't like immigration because they don't like hearing foreign languages in public. Pro-immigration voices, the ones that aren't scared of low-income people anyway, insist that the housing problem is not a demand issue, but actually it's a supply issue. We don't need to lower immigration, we need to build more houses. anti-immigration voices, the ones that aren't booing brown people on Anzac Day, say that it's not a supply issue, but a demand issue. We don't need to increase supply, we need to decrease demand. Most frustratingly to me is that neither of these groups want to admit that the other group probably has a point too. Liberals' idea is to slash net migration by 90%, which is impossible because that would require breaking mutual working holiday agreements with dozens of countries. Liberals will not do this because 80% of those agreements were signed off by Liberals. The Greens, well, their plan is to increase humanitarian intake of people to 50,000 and to end the offshore detention centres, giving every offshore prisoner's remaining sentence to Tony Abbott. How about One Nation? Well, they want to cut immigration by more than 570,000 people and cut the heads off the rest of them. Right, with that done, let's move on to cost of living and housing affordability. Australia is one of the most expensive places to buy a home in the world. The median house price is around 14 times the annual median income. This is much higher than what most experts agree the definition of affordable housing is, which is 3 to 5 times the median income. This, combined with the fact that Australia lacks any sort of economic industry outside of flint and steel, mining, Australia is one of the most expensive places to buy land in the world, unless, of course, you are a multinational mining conglomerate who donates money to both political parties. In that case, we will literally give you billions of dollars worth of our resource-rich land to mine and to sell completely tax-free. Thanks to various short-sighted policies, the average home now costs more than $1 million. And with us being one of the only developed nations in the world to use variable interest rates, first home buyers have to climb an impossibly steep mountain just to barely afford a home, of which the repayments in the last 5 years have increased by 30%. Yes, I'm talking about me. I'm fucking drowning. The millennial dream of ever owning a home is fading. Gen Z never had the dream, and boomers dream so hard they own enough houses for the rest of us but won't share. Because after all, share houses are for the poor. Disappointingly, but not surprisingly, neither major party wants to lessen demand by turning housing into, I don't know, housing instead of an investment option for cashed up boomers. Labor's solution to the housing crisis is to build more shelters for homeless people, which is a pretty cool way of saying, yeah, we're getting ready for a lot more of them. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Instead of making, I don't know, homes affordable for people before they give up on life and start doing heroin on the street. Liberals' grand idea to fix this is to change nothing. In fact, they've committed to house prices steadily rising, just like Labor have, treating anyone who doesn't own a home like hungover tourists who missed the boat back. Good luck with being stranded on the street. We're on our way home to one of our homes. The Greens, however, do have an idea. They want to build 500,000 public and community homes. Unfortunately, though, the budget for this project has completely ballooned as they require every home built to have a sensory room, a prayer room for each faith, and 13 bathrooms, one for each gender. And then we have One Nation's plan, which is to execute all Chinese people and see what happens. Next, we have the environment. The environment. If you looked at all of Australia, 95% of it is completely uninhabitable. And if you went there, every animal you brought, and every plant you tried to grow there would die like some fucked up reverse Noah's Ark. You'd think that this would inspire us to protect the very few habitable areas of this country that we can actually stay alive in. But then again, how good is coal? For some reason, this country is obsessed with a type of energy that most other nations have only ever seen used in silent films about steam trains. Coal mining is so important to our politicians that our worst and most disliked former PM brought some into Parliament and thought we would like it. I'm a little bit suspicious of Scott Morrison's claim to love coal because when, thanks to his inaction on climate change, hundreds of Australians and thousands of their homes were converted to coal by bushfires, Scotty was nowhere nowhere to be seen. With nearly half of Australia's largest mining, energy, and water companies paying zero corporate income tax and zero export taxes, you start to see why they can afford to pay so much money to almost every political party to ignore the fact that they aren't paying their fucking taxes. If we tax these mining companies properly like Dubai did, we could literally have more money than Dubai does without any of the slave labor. Now, imagine if we brought back slavery. Sorry, I did too much research about One Nation and I got sucked in. The Greens want Australia to aim for 100% renewable energy by 2030, catching us up to, embarrassingly, third world countries like England. Liberals want to repeal several of Labor's climate policies and increase our reliance on gas while they build 7 nuclear power plants by 2035 somehow, a plan which experts are saying will cost us more than $500 billion. Labor says that spending $500 billion on anything nuclear is absolutely a colossal waste of money. Unless you're spending it on nuclear fucking submarines that we don't need. Labor's plan for the environment is to be net zero by 2050 while also supporting coal and gas exports, which is a pretty fun loophole, isn't it? Hey, we're not polluting the planet. We're carbon neutral. We're just facilitating China's pollution of the environment with our resources. So technically, we're good. And One Nation's plan is to abolish the Department of Climate Change and eliminate funding from all climate-related programs. I guess someone told Pauline those programs were Chinese. They also famously want to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. I'm assuming because it was French, and we all know how racist regimes feel about agreements made in France. That was a joke about how Hitler rose to power and the Nazi Party. Well done to all my history buffs who understood that one. Now, if you've made it this far, you now know everything there is to know about this election. You don't need to know anything else. And now, you can make an informed decision about who you should vote for. Or at least you could if I released this video a couple days earlier, but it took me a long time to write. So long, in fact, that I didn't really even have time to memorize it, so I just read what I wrote and then posted this. So, look, I could have been a little bit more organized, but the point is, I hope the video was entertaining while we are either celebrating or mourning whoever is the leader of our country. And look, on a serious note, it is easy to feel disheartened by the political process here, but with Australia being a representative democracy, I am proud to live in a country where every single vote actually counts, where there's no such thing as a wasted vote, and where independent parties are holding the big dogs accountable on very important single issues like weed and sex and fishing. Anyway, I've got to go. I have about 10,000 text messages from my good friend Clive Palmer that I need to respond to with abuse. I'm Lewis Spears. Like, subscribe, and see me live in 25. If you like these videos, let me know. I'll do more writing.